I'm recording this morning from my home office, as you can see behind me, all the many books stacked every place in my desk. I'm dreaming. So I'm reading today from Genesis chapter 28, verses 10 through 19. It's a story of Jacob's ladder. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. He came to a certain place and he stayed there for the night, because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set up on the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood beside him and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offsprings, and your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob woke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So Jacob rose in the morning, and he took the stone that he had put under his head and set it on a pillar and poured oil on the top of it. He called that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at the first. I was out this morning taking a long walk in the woods and began to take photos of the trail and all the wild things that grew alongside it. I just can't help but appreciate the wonder and the beauty of nature. There's some things I've learned about the great outdoors. One of them is I really love to walk. Whether it's in the mountains in Ireland or along the seashore or the countryside trails along the creeks and woods near my own neighborhood, I find a quietness and a connection to good old Mother Earth. Perhaps some of that comes from my growing up in a farm community. When you live in a farm community, the land's sacred. As one farmer told me, it giveth and it taketh away. And depending on the year, well, you farmers know what I'm talking about. That's all so true. Another part of me that understands the good old Mother Earth is because of my theological training. While systematic theology is the actual subject taught in my seminary, it allows us individuals to wrestle with how we implement our theology into practical terms. Merriam-Webster's dictionary says that systematic theology is a branch of theology concerned with summarizing the doctrinal traditions of a religion, such as Christianity for us, and especially with a view relating to the traditions convincingly to the religion's present-day settings. So it began my search on how to understand God. And I found myself wrestling with that age-old question, where can I find the divine? Which then helps me understand the other old question, who am I? And what I discovered for me, that God is everywhere. Some years back, I attended a lecture at Anderson University School of Theology. The guest lecturer was Dr. Adolfo Reutemann. You might know that name because he's a curator of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the information about the Qumran community. One of the memorable things he brought to our attention was the relationship between God being somewhere specific and God being, well, everywhere. Let me explain to you a little bit about that. You see, at the time of the Qumran community, the temple still existed in Jerusalem. And if you're not familiar with the arrangement, it was kind of arranged in different levels. Us normal folk just were outside the walls completely. And then a priest could enter to a certain level. And depending on how high you were in the hierarchy, you could go deeper into the temple until finally the high priest could enter the Holy of Holies, which is where you met God. See, the Qumran community didn't believe that. They had wandered off into the desert, were living in caves and woolly garments. They didn't confine God to a building or to a place. Instead, they taught that God was with them always and everywhere. Reichman went on to tell the crowd there's a great possibility that John the Baptist was a member of the Qumran community. Remember, John wandered in from the desert with a woolly coat on? And he said there's a chance that Jesus was at least a supporter of the Qumran community and their theology. However, I want to be careful here and say that there's no proof of either of those claims. But if you see how John and Jesus reacted to the religious leaders and the way religion was practiced that time, it's more than possible that his comment was true. And I love that because I can't agree with it very dramatically that God is everywhere. Because I think that everyone from a very early time in history has tried to connect with the divine. And for us Christians, we call that God. But earlier people had other names and ways of understanding. In Ireland, for example, there exist in the Boyne River Valley some megalithic passage tombs. Their names are Noath and Newgrange. And yes, I've been to both of them. Newgrange, which is the oldest, is 5,200 years old. Trying to figure out what that is? That means it's older than Stonehenge and older than the Egyptian pyramids. Now, archaeologists classified Newgrange as a passage tomb. However, Newgrange is now recognized to be much more than a passage tomb. Ancient temple is a more fitting classification, a place of astrological, spiritual, religious, and ceremonial importance, much as present-day cathedrals are places of prestige and worship where dignitaries may be laid to rest. The bottom line is that this specific place must have been a place where they were worshiping the sun, at least to some extent. I'm saying that because in the winter equinox, for 16 minutes at sunrise, the sun shines through a small opening, illuminating the passage and the tomb area. It must have been really important to them. Were they worshiping God as we understand it today? No, but they were still searching for a connection to the divine. Well, I could go on because I love history, and I love this idea, and of course, you know that I love Ireland. However, how does this match up with our scripture today? I think it all centers around the latter part of the reading from Genesis today, which I will share with you again. Then Jacob woke from his sleep and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." And he was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." You see, all along, God was with Jacob, and he didn't even know it. Have you taken quizzes online? I've taken several. Their idea, I think, is to tap into the human desire to move and to prove that lives are pretty great, especially compared to others. Think about them for a second. Like the one who asks you which famous movie star you are. If your friend does it, I bet you do it too to find out if you're a bigger star than they were. It's like a competition to find out who's the coolest. Another one of those quizzes asks how many places you've been to. There are names of states and countries. All of it's harmless fun. But the only place that really matters is where God is. Really, seeing 100 places before you die isn't that important. Not when we consider that no one particular location in the world is quite as amazing as the God who made that location and who is present in it. Jacob certainly wasn't playing these games when he was on his way to Haran. Given that he was a place he needed to get away from from his furious older brother Esau. He was on the run. He was moving faster than a couple of nuns on the Amazing Race. You see, Jacob had cheated on his brother and caused his brother to lose out on his father's blessing and inheritance. And now Jacob was fleeing to his ancestral home to hole up and, he hoped, to find a wife. Haran was the only place he was interested in checking off before he died. But on the way, Jacob stops in a certain place for a night, a random spot in the Canaanite desert. Jacob pulls up a stone for a less than resort quality pillow and beds down for the night, and as he drifts off, he has a dream. A ladder set up on the earth, the top of it reaching to the heavens, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. The angels don't speak to Jacob, but the writer of Genesis tells us that God stood beside Jacob and provided the narrative to the scene. That narrative was a restatement of the covenant promised by God with Jacob's grandfather Abraham. It was a promise of numerous offsprings and a family through which all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Despite his devious deception in snagging his brother's birthright, despite being the younger brother, Jacob was going to be the one whom God's redemptive plan for creation was going to continue. But family inheritance was in the future. It's what God says next that Jacob really took to heart. Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised. Jacob wasn't going to be checking off 100 wonders of the world during his travels, but he would have something that every person, whether they're well-traveled or a homebody, really needs. That's the presence of God. No matter where he traveled, no matter what dangers waited in front of him and behind him on the journey, God was going to be with him and keep him. Wherever Jacob was, even in the trackless, faceless, and nameless place where a stone makes for a pillow, God was going to be there. And when Jacob awoke from his dream, the angel staircase was gone, and all that was left was the rock that he had laid his head on. And Jacob took it, poured oil on it, and marked it as sacred. Surely the Lord is in this place, and I didn't know it. How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God and the gate of heaven. He was afraid, a natural reaction to encountering the holy. But he was also overjoyed to realize that what had once been a nowhere place was now a somewhere place because God had been there. Jacob came to understand an important truth. It doesn't matter where you've been. It only matters that God is with you wherever you are. It doesn't matter if you're in Paris or Peoria, in the Louvre or Louisville, Bora Bora or Bucksnort, Tennessee. Every place is sacred. Every place is holy. Every place is important because you are there and God promises to be there too. Even in those places that feel like trackless spiritual desert, sometimes it's the apparent God-forsaken places that become the most holy because God's already there, even if you didn't know it at first. I mean, no one would put a hospital in their top 100 places to visit, but even in the isolation of illness and pain, God is there offering healing and hope. There are lots of lonely places we can find ourselves. The loneliness of grief, unemployment, or a broken relationship. Like Jacob, we can believe we're all alone with no one to help. But in those lonely places that God often encounters us, offering a sense of presence in the way that we need. We might dream of vacation, but life often puts us in places where we experience years of hard work with little immediate gratification. Working a job, raising rambunctious children, caring for aging parents. These are all places that require us to dig in and bed down for a long haul with something that feels like a rock for a pillow. And yet, in working diligently, engaging those special moments with small children, or seeing the smile of a parent who forgets us, we discover to our amazement that God is there with us and strengthens us to go the distance. We certainly want to avoid the funeral home, but it's One of those places that most of us will visit when a loved one dies. In fact, it's the one place that almost all of us will visit when we die. But even there, God is present and reminds us of the promise of resurrection. Any of these places can be the house of God or the gate of heaven. At this time, when most of us are outside our church buildings, our synagogues, our mosques, it's holy ground still, because it's holy ground wherever God stands beside us, reminding us that God will never leave us no matter the circumstances. Every place can be awesome if we're paying attention. Sure, it's fun to think about traveling to exotic locales and seeing the wonders of the world. It's something we all ought to get to do if we have the chance. I know I love to do it. But whether it's the ends of the earth or the ends of your street, it's an awesome place because God is there. All the wild world is beautiful, and it matters but little where we go, to the highlands or the lowlands, to the woods or the plains, to the seas or the land, or down the crystal waves of high up in a balloon in the sky, through all the climates, hot and cold, storms and calm, everywhere and always, we are in God's eternal beauty and love. So universally true is this, the spot where we chance to be always seems to be the best. Finding God in all things is at the core of my spirituality and is rooted in my growing awareness that God can be found in everyone, in every place, and in everything. You know, when I learn to pay more attention to God, I become more thankful and more reverent. And through this, I become more devoted to God and more deeply in love with our Creator. Know that in these times when we're separated one from another and separated from our place of worship, God is still there with us. Enjoy that time, whether it's in nature like it is for me when I'm out for a walk, or whether it's for you in whatever endeavor you're doing. Know that God is there with you through the pain and the joy. This is the word of God for the people of God. Praise be to God.